What are springboards and sequences?
So I did not invent springboards and sequences, and unfortunately I can't remember where I picked this up, but I think it's a really useful thing when you're trying to figure out kind of that, well, it's really useful when you're trying to figure out Act 2, right? Because it allows you to break your story down into smaller chunks. So sequences, a lot of people have heard of. You can think of your movie as sort of 8 sequences. 2 sequences in Act 1, 4 sequences in Act 2, 2 sequences in Act 3, right? So that's sort of the division of sequences across your 3-act structure. It's pretty common to look at movies in sort of that sequence structure. The springboards, I think, are the real bonus of this exercise that I sort of help writers with, which is coming up with that, that event or turning point or plot point that ends one sequence and launches the next one. And that, it's just a way for you to sort of start planning out your story so that there's a real sense of cause and effect, and it breaks it down into manageable chunks when you are plotting or even when you're writing. I do this and I teach this method, which is to outline in sequences. So you only have to focus on one sequence at a time, which makes it less daunting to approach your entire story.
If we were to look at Crash, and I know you said that that was one of the most difficult of the 50, or you know,
yeah,
great, awesome film, but yeah, in terms of the structure, what would be some of those springboards?
That's a good question. I haven't actually seen Crash in so long that,
okay,
that it would be tough.
I haven't either.
It would be tough. But I will say, if you're looking at sort of the way springboards and sequences overlay onto the 3-act structure, right? And it does. They line right up, and it's. I'm certainly not saying that every movie has to have 8 equal sequences across the movie, but this is just a method to help you plot your story, and you may deviate from this as you find your story, right? So every story is unique, and you have to serve that story, the story that you're telling, but it gives you a starting point. So if I am coming at a story and I just really don't know anything yet, I start thinking in the springboards and sequences, because that gives me sort of containers to think about what needs to happen in each section of the script. And then as I find what needs to happen in each section, I might go, oh, well, I only need 1 sequence here, or I only need, maybe I need 3 short sequences here, or whatever. But it just gives you a starting point to sort of break your story. And then if you're, we were talking about what is a springboard and sort of where do they fall, your kind of big turning points naturally are springboards. So your inciting incident is your first springboard, right? So you have a sequence of your story that's going to be all set up, really, introducing your protagonist, establishing the world, all that stuff, what's their life like right now, and then that sequence will end in the inciting incident, which is a springboard that launches the next sequence. So because of that inciting incident, your protagonist now has some sort of problem or opportunity that they're going to have to deal with, right? And that is what sequence 2 is about. So it's like, what are they going to do with this? How are they going to contend with it? What happens if they don't deal with it? What's at stake? All that stuff. Closing all those like sort of immediate doors to convince us that they're going to take that Act 2 journey. So you work through that sequence, and then that ends in the next springboard, which is your break into 2, right? So then you have a big sort of plot turn at that moment, which is usually your protagonist deciding, yes, I'm going to go do this thing. Here's my plan for solving this big problem in my life. That's your springboard that launches you into sequence 3. So the sort of springboard and sequences that we use as like a framework to start figuring out your story really just lays on top of 3-act structure, and a lot of your major turning points that you have probably already thought of, those are going to be springboards anyway.
So if I was going to take, let's say, going back to this librarian with the bad boy boyfriend.
I like this story. We should keep developing this.
More and more too, yeah. If let's suppose she's called into the administrator's office for this central library, and they say, I need to have a seat. Listen, we do not advocate dating people that are within our programs here. And is that a springboard, or her springboard would then be to make a decision? Let's suppose she's still allowed to keep her job, but she's been given a reprimand, and it's going in her file. What part would actually be a springboard?
Well, so I actually think it's both of those things. So it's the event that turns the story in a new direction or launches the next sort of sequence of events, but that is going to be led off by your character's reaction to that event. So it might be, she's sat down by her superior. They say, you have a choice. You can either keep your job or keep the guy. And then her reaction to that is really what we're watching over the next sequence. So that sequence is going to start with her probably making some sort of decision, right? It'll probably be in the next scene, or it might not. But long story short, the springboard would be the event, and then her reaction to it would be what we'd be tracking over the next sequence, probably.
Right, okay, because let's say then she goes like on the subway and maybe she sees couples together and she's kind of like sizing up like, is this where I fit into coupledom with like, even though I've chosen someone that's maybe outside my circle of friends.
Yeah, well, so that's actually a good example because I think that the options that you brought up, it could work both ways. So the springboard could be she sat down and told you have to make this choice, and then the next sequence might be about us watching her make that choice, right? Or that the next sequence might be after she walks out of that office knowing she's gonna ditch the job and go with the guy, then the next sequence might be her trying to convince him that they're in it together and there's no one else and whatever. You know what I mean? So it just kind of depends on your story. That's why I said it's just a framework to sort of help us, start breaking your story and think about like what needs to happen in each section of your story.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, great. Yeah, the script is coming together and I'm not even going to write it.